photograph was taken in October 2012 inside the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. 7 men in dark suits stand in a line. Their faces are composed. Their hands rest at their sides. One of them, Xi Jinping, stands slightly forward. Within 3 years, 2 of the men beside him would disappear from public life entirely. No announcement was made. No charges were filed in open court. The removals happened through a mechanism that had always existed, but had never been used this way. Not at this scale, not with this precision. The mechanism was called anti-corruption. In November 2012, Xi Jinping became General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. The transition was expected. What followed was not. Within weeks, provincial officials began receiving instructions to audit their finances. Party cadres were told to report luxury expenditures. The language was familiar. Every new administration spoke about clean governance. But this time, the audits didn't stop. By early 2013, investigators had begun detaining mid-level officials in Sichuan and Guangdong. The charges were always specific: accepting bribes, embezzling state funds, abusing public resources. The evidence was always substantial, and the arrests kept moving upward. The system Xi inherited was built on patronage. Promotions didn't flow from merit alone. They required sponsorship. A provincial governor owed his position to a Politburo member. That Politburo member owed his position to someone higher. Loyalty moved vertically. Power was distributed horizontally. The arrangement kept the party stable because no single faction could dominate. It also made the party vulnerable because everyone had something to hide. Xi understood this better than most. He had spent years navigating the system, building alliances in Fujian, Zhejiang, and Shanghai. He knew which officials owed favors to whom. He knew where the money moved. And he knew that in a system built on patronage, corruption wasn't an aberration. It was the structure itself. In July 2013, investigators detained a man named Gu Junshan. He was a deputy logistics chief in the People's Liberation Army. His home, when searched, contained more than 200 military license plates, cash in 16 currencies, and a scale model of the Forbidden City made entirely from jade. The arrest made headlines. It also sent a message. The military, previously untouchable, was no longer exempt. To party members watching, this looked like discipline. To foreign observers, it looked like reform. But inside Zhongnanhai, the leadership compound in Beijing, the question being asked was different. The question was, who decides what counts as corruption? The answer, increasingly, was Xi. By 2014, the campaign had a name: Operation Fox Hunt. Its stated purpose was to track down officials who had fled abroad with stolen assets. Its actual function was broader. Investigators were now empowered to examine anyone, at any rank, for any financial irregularity dating back decades. And because the Chinese system lacked separation between party and state, there was no independent judiciary to review the charges. The party investigated itself. In December 2014, Zhou Yongkang was placed under investigation. He had been a member of the Politburo Standing Committee, the innermost circle of power. He had controlled China's security apparatus. He had built a network of allies across the oil industry, the military, and provincial governments. He was, by every measure, untouchable until he wasn't. Zhou's fall didn't happen publicly. There was no trial broadcast on state television, no detailed indictment released to the press. Instead, the announcement came through Xinhua, the state news agency, in a single paragraph. Zhou Yongkang was being investigated for serious violations of discipline. The word corruption appeared once. The word conspiracy did not appear at all. But within the party, everyone understood. Zhou had been the most powerful patron in the system. His removal meant that every official he had ever promoted was now vulnerable. And because patronage networks overlap, that vulnerability extended across factions. A governor in Shanxi who owed his career to Zhou might have also received support from someone in the Hu Jintao faction. He couldn't defend himself by claiming loyalty to one side, because loyalty itself had become evidence. The brilliance of the mechanism was its deniability. Xi wasn't purging rivals, he was enforcing party discipline. And because corruption was genuinely widespread, the charges were always technically accurate. An official might have accepted a bribe 10 years earlier, a minor infraction in a system where such things were routine. But in 2015, that infraction became grounds for removal. The rules hadn't changed. The enforcement had. By 2016, more than 1 million officials had been investigated. Most were low-ranking. Some were provincial governors. A few were members of the Central Committee. The pattern was clear. Officials who had worked under Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao, Xi's predecessors, were disproportionately targeted. Officials who had worked under Xi were not. This created a feedback loop. To survive, officials needed to demonstrate loyalty to Xi personally. Loyalty required visibility. Visibility required participating in the campaign. Provincial leaders began competing to see who could investigate more officials, recover more assets, discipline more cadres. The campaign became self-sustaining. In October 2017, Xi stood before the 19th Party Congress and delivered a report that lasted 3.5 hours. He spoke about the anti-corruption campaign as a matter of survival. The party, he said, had faced the threat of collapse. Corruption had metastasized. Discipline had weakened. Immediate action had been necessary. He did not mention Zhou Yongkang by name. He did not need to. That same Congress eliminated the term limits that had governed Chinese leadership since the 1990s. The change was presented as a constitutional amendment. It passed unanimously. No delegate raised an objection. And why would they? By 2017, every delegate in the room understood that objection was indistinguishable from disloyalty, and disloyalty was indistinguishable from corruption. The removal of term limits wasn't a separate decision. It was the logical conclusion of the anti-corruption campaign. Once the mechanism existed to remove anyone for any infraction, the only safe position was total alignment. And total alignment required a single center of authority. The system Xi built didn't require mass arrests. It required uncertainty. An official could follow every rule, avoid every bribe, live modestly, and still face investigation if someone higher up decided he was a risk. The arbitrariness was the point. It made preemptive loyalty the only rational strategy. By 2018, the campaign had formalized into a new institution, the National Supervision Commission. It absorbed the party's internal discipline mechanism and merged it with state prosecutorial power. The commission answered directly to Xi. It operated outside the judiciary. It could detain anyone for up to 6 months without charge. And because its mandate was to investigate duty-related violations, the definition of misconduct was infinitely elastic. This wasn't a deviation from the system. It was the system perfected. Other leaders had used anti-corruption campaigns before. Mao had used them to consolidate control in the 1950s. Deng had used them selectively in the 1980s, but those campaigns were episodic. They ended. Xi's campaign didn't end because it was never really about corruption. It was about eliminating optionality. In a patronage system, power is diffuse. Multiple factions compete, coalitions shift, succession is negotiated. But once a single leader controls the definition of corruption, power stops being negotiable. It becomes binary. You align, or you become a target. And because everyone has something in their past that could be framed as a violation, alignment becomes obligatory. The officials purged under Xi weren't all innocent. Many had taken bribes. Many had abused their positions, but so had many officials who were never investigated. The difference wasn't guilt. The difference was who they knew, who had promoted them, and whether their removal served a larger objective. The collapse of the Soviet Union happened because no single leader could consolidate authority. Factions fought each other to paralysis. The military split. The republics seceded. The party dissolved. Chinese leaders studied that collapse obsessively. They concluded that fragmentation was the greatest threat, and so they built a system designed to prevent it. But preventing fragmentation required concentration, and concentration required a mechanism to remove anyone who might resist. The anti-corruption campaign was that mechanism. It turned a structural weakness, widespread corruption, into a tool for centralization, and it did so under the rhetoric of reform. To Western observers, the campaign looked like progress. Transparency, accountability, rule of law, these were the words used in editorials. But inside China, the campaign looked different. It looked like the closing of space, the narrowing of options, the elimination of alternatives. By 2022, Xi had been in power for a decade. He was reappointed for a third term. No rival faction emerged. No credible challenger appeared. The Politburo's Standing Committee was filled entirely with officials who had risen under Xi's patronage. The decision had already been made. The vote was procedural. The anti-corruption campaign continues. New officials are investigated every year. New networks are dismantled. New factions are preempted before they can form. The mechanism doesn't need to be used constantly. It only needs to exist. Its existence is enough to enforce alignment. In other systems, purges are visible, opponents are named, trials are public, the violence is explicit. But in systems that value stability, purges happen quietly. They happen through bureaucracy, through investigations that take years, through retirements announced without explanation. The result is the same. The method is cleaner. The question isn't whether Xi used anti-corruption to remove rivals. The question is whether any other method would have worked. In a system where power depends on networks, and networks depend on loyalty, the only way to centralize authority is to make everyone vulnerable. And the only way to make everyone vulnerable is to criminalize the structure itself. The photograph from 2012 is still available. 7 men in a line, their faces composed, their hands at their sides. 2 of them are gone. The others remain, but in diminished roles. Only one still stands at the center, and the mechanism that put him there is still running.